Ash drifts like snow across the parched earth of Redemption Springs. A church bell tolls 3 times, then falls silent. The sound carries over burned buildings and fresh graves, a warning too late for those already lost. In the distance, riders approach through heat haze, torches blazing against the dying light. They say vengeance is a fire that consumes everything it touches. But some fires are lit deliberately by steady hands that understand the price of destruction. 5 years of planning, 5 years of nightmares. 5 years watching from shadows gathering strength while grief calcifies into purpose. The West was built on broken promises and unmarked graves, on blood spilled and quickly forgotten, on men who create kingdoms through fear and women forced to rebuild from the ashes they leave behind. But ashes are strange things. Sometimes if you look closely enough, you can see the outline of what once was and what might be again. Tonight everything burns. Eleanor Vance stood at her brother's grave. The fresh earth darkened beneath the steady rain. Around her, the small cemetery of Redemption Springs seemed to hold its breath. No birds sang, no wind stirred the pines, just rain on dirt and the hollow echo of a sister's grief. 5 days since Matthew died. 5 days since her world collapsed again. She didn't cry. Tears had abandoned her long ago during the war. What remained was something harder, something colder. A diamond formed under the pressure of loss. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," she whispered. The gravestone was simple. Matthew would have wanted it that way. Matthew Vance, beloved brother, taken too soon. What it didn't say: murdered by the Blackwater gang, tortured for information he didn't have, left to die in the mud. Eleanor adjusted her black veil. At 38, she wore widowhood like a second skin. Grief had carved elegant lines into her face, transformed once bright eyes into calculating instruments. The war had taught her strategy. Loss had taught her patience. Behind her, footsteps approached, squelching in the mud. "Mrs. Vance," Sheriff James Reynolds, his voice low with practiced sympathy. "Service is over. You shouldn't be out in this rain." She didn't turn. "Did you find anything?" A hesitation. "Too long." "No, ma'am, not yet." "It's been 5 days, Sheriff." Blackwater moves fast. They're ghosts. Cross state lines before the blood's dry." Eleanor finally faced him. Reynolds was a solid man, mid-40s, with a weathered face and eyes that revealed nothing. She had never trusted him, not since he'd refused to help Thomas, her husband, all those years ago. "My brother was carrying nothing of value," she said. "Just a letter, a private correspondence." Reynolds shifted his weight. "Mrs. Vance, with respect, that letter was encrypted military correspondence," she finished for him. "Or so they believed." Something changed in Reynolds' expression. Surprise quickly masked. "I don't follow." "You don't need to, Sheriff." Eleanor adjusted her gloves. "Thank you for attending the service." She moved past him, feeling his eyes on her back. Let him wonder. Let him report to whoever was paying him. The wheels were already turning. The rain intensified as Eleanor walked through town. Redemption Springs had grown since the war, a crossroads town between nowhere and possibility. False fronts on the buildings gave it an air of respectability it hadn't earned. She knew its secrets, the way it had turned its back on her husband, the way it harbored traitors and cowards. Now it would be her weapon. Miss Abernathy's dress shop appeared ahead, its windows glowing with warm light. Eleanor paused, checking the street in both directions. Empty. She entered, the small bell announcing her arrival. "Mrs. Vance?" Clara Abernathy emerged from behind a rack of fabrics, wiping her hands on her apron. A plump woman with sharp eyes. Clara had lost her husband at Antietam. "I didn't expect you today, of all days." "It's time," Eleanor said simply. Clara's expression hardened. "Matthew, it wasn't random. They were looking for something specific." The dressmaker locked the front door, turned the sign to closed, and led Eleanor to the back room. There she removed a stack of dress patterns, revealing a trapdoor. Underground, the room was small but meticulously organized. Maps covered one wall, names and connections on another. Weapons carefully maintained lined a rack. 5 other women waited, different ages, different backgrounds. United by loss, the Widow's Network. Eleanor had named them half in irony, half in truth. Not all had lost husbands, but all had lost something to men's violence. "I thought this day might never come," said Ruth Carter, the youngest at 23, her husband killed by raiders 2 years prior. "I hoped it wouldn't," Eleanor replied, "but Blackwater has forced our hand." Martha Wilson, once the town's school teacher, now the Madam of the Rose Room Saloon, spoke next. "Your brother's death, it wasn't just another robbery." "No." Eleanor removed her veil. "The letter Matthew carried was bait. A fake military dispatch I created. Rumors of gold shipments, troop movements. Things the Blackwater gang would kill for." Silence fell across the room. "You used your own brother as bait," Clara whispered. "No." Eleanor's voice cracked, the first sign of emotion. "Never. Matthew knew nothing. He believed he was delivering correspondence to a former military colleague. The letter was encrypted, and I'd placed agents along his route. He should have been safe. But he wasn't," said Sarah Miller, a widow who ran the town's only hotel. "No," Eleanor admitted. "Someone knew. Someone told Blackwater exactly when and where to find him. Someone in this town." The women exchanged glances. "A spy," Ruth breathed. "More likely a sympathizer," Eleanor said. "Someone who communicates with Blackwater, who warns them of patrols, identifies targets." "How do we find them?" asked Elizabeth Dawson, whose quiet demeanor masked her skills as the group's best shot. "We don't," Eleanor said. "We let them find us." She unrolled a map of the territory on the table. "For 5 years I've prepared for this. Gathering information, building networks, training. Now we activate everything." Her finger traced a line across the map. "Blackwater's territory, 7 towns under their shadow. They're not just bandits. They have a structure, a philosophy. Their leader, Silas Kane, was a Confederate officer, special operations. I encountered his handiwork during the war." "What do they want?" Martha asked. "Power, territory, a kingdom built on fear." Eleanor's eyes never left the map. "And they want me." "You." Clara's eyebrows rose. "Matthew's letter contained one true thing. My location. I've been hiding since the war ended. Silas Kane has been looking for me." "Why?" Elizabeth asked. Eleanor straightened her face, a mask of controlled rage. "Because I orchestrated the ambush that killed his entire command. And because he thinks I'm like him, someone who can help build his new order." The room fell silent. "He's wrong," Eleanor continued. "I'm nothing like him, and I will destroy everything he's built." "How do we start?" Ruth asked. "Information. Eyes and ears everywhere. Martha, your girls hear things. Clara, your shop sees every woman in town. Sarah, travelers at the hotel. Elizabeth, you have connections with the ranchers. Ruby, you're our link to the church community." Ruby Johnson, who had been silent until now, nodded. At 40, with silver streaking her dark hair, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She had been Eleanor's first recruit, her closest confidant. "And what about you?" Ruby asked. "I'll be the target," Eleanor said simply. "The bait. Kane wants me. Let's make him think he can have me." "That's suicide," Clara protested. "It's strategy." Eleanor's eyes were flint. "Matthew died because of my plan. I won't hide behind anyone else." She looked at each woman in turn. "This isn't just about revenge. Blackwater grows stronger every day. They've murdered, raped, and terrorized across 3 states. The army won't act. The law's bought or scared. We're all that stands between them and complete control of this territory." "When do we move?" Elizabeth asked, checking her revolver. "We already have." Eleanor traced a circle around Redemption Springs. "Matthew's death sent a message. Kane knows I'm here. Now we wait for his response." Silas Kane watched his men from the shadow of the cave entrance. 20 hardened fighters cleaning weapons, drinking playing cards. Some bore the scars of war, others the marks of a harder life. All followed him with unwavering loyalty. They had reason to. In a world that had cast them aside, he had given them purpose. In a nation that had betrayed its promises, he offered a new vision. The remnants of a shattered army now transformed into something more dangerous, true believers. "Report," he said without preamble as Daniel Foster approached. Foster, once a Union cavalry scout, now Kane's eyes and ears, handed over a small leather pouch. "Confirmation. Eleanor Vance is in Redemption Springs. Has been for nearly 3 years." Kane opened the pouch, examined the contents. A torn piece of the letter they'd taken from Matthew Vance, a daguerreotype of a woman with sharp features and determined eyes, a military insignia. Her brother, buried yesterday. She was there just as our friend reported. Kane nodded satisfaction, warming his chest. After all this time, the architect of Heron's Creek. She's just a woman, Foster said cautiously. Kane's hand moved with viper speed, gripping Foster's throat. That woman orchestrated the most devastating intelligence trap of the war. 300 men burned alive. My men. He released Foster, who stumbled back. Never underestimate her. Sorry, sir. Foster rubbed his throat. What's our move? Kane turned back to the cave entrance, watching distant storm clouds gather over the mountains. We've been building something here, Foster. A movement. Territory by territory, town by town. Taking back what was stolen from us. Creating a new order from the ashes of the old. Yes, sir. Eleanor Vance would be valuable. She sees the world as it truly is. Kane's eyes narrowed. Or she could destroy everything we've built. He turned back to Foster. Tell our friend in Redemption Springs to watch her. Every move, every word. I want to know who she speaks to, who she trusts. And then, Kane smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Then we give her a proper welcome. Eleanor watched the town from her window. 2 stories up, the view encompassed Main Street, the church steeple, and the rolling hills beyond. The perfect vantage point. The perfect trap. Matthew had bought this house for her 3 years ago, when she'd arrived broken and haunted. A place to heal, he'd said. A place to start over. She traced the familiar patterns of the town's rhythms. Men to the mines at dawn, women to market mid-morning, children to and from school. The patterns revealed weaknesses, opportunities, secrets. A knock at the door pulled her from her observations. Enter. Ruby stepped inside, removing her bonnet. Her face was drawn with exhaustion. You shouldn't be here in broad daylight, Eleanor said, offering a chair. Appearances must be maintained. I'm calling on the bereaved sister of my church friend. Ruby sat heavily. I have news. Eleanor waited. 3 strangers checked into the hotel last night. Sarah says they paid in gold. Asked questions about the town, about recent burials. Description: hard men, weather-beaten, one missing an ear, another with burned scars on his hands. The third younger, but with dead eyes. Eleanor nodded. Kane's forward scouts. He never moves without intelligence. There's more. Sheriff Reynolds met with them this morning. Private room at the saloon. A piece clicked into place. So that's the connection. You suspected. Reynolds refused to help Thomas when Blackwater took him. Said it was outside his jurisdiction. I always wondered if it was cowardice or complicity. Ruby's eyes darkened. I'll never understand men like that, selling their souls piece by piece. Everyone has a price, Ruby, even good men. Eleanor poured 2 glasses of whiskey, especially good men. They drank in silence, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. The plan, Ruby finally asked. We need to know how deep Reynolds is with them, and we need to identify their other assets in town. Martha has 2 girls watching the hotel. Elizabeth is tracking the strangers. Clara has spread word that I'm holding a prayer circle for Matthew tomorrow. Eleanor nodded. Good. Keep building the narrative that I'm broken, vulnerable. A grieving sister, nothing more. Ruby studied her friend. How much of that is an act, Eleanor? The question hung in the air between them. Matthew was everything I had left. Eleanor admitted, her voice suddenly raw. When Thomas died, when I lost him to Blackwater, Matthew saved me, brought me here, gave me purpose beyond revenge. And now, Eleanor's expression hardened. Now I finish what I started. Kane took my husband. Now he's taken my brother. There won't be a third. Ruby reached across, took Eleanor's hand. You're not alone this time. That's what worries me, Eleanor replied. Anyone close to me becomes a target. We chose this, Ruby reminded her. Every woman in the network. We knew the risks. Eleanor squeezed her hand, then stood, moving back to the window. Kane won't move directly against me. Not yet. He'll test, probe, try to understand my position. He'll want to know if I'm still the strategist I was during the war. And are you? Eleanor's reflection in the glass showed a cold smile. I'm better. I have nothing left to lose. The church stood on the edge of town, white-clabbered, stark against the green hills beyond. Inside, 12 women gathered in the small side room, Bibles open, heads bowed. To any observer, a prayer circle for the recently departed. Ruby led the prayers, her voice rising and falling in practiced cadence. Eleanor sat quietly playing the role of the grieving sister. Through the window, she noted 3 men loitering across the street watching the church. Blackwater scouts, no subtlety at all. When the prayers concluded, the women dispersed, gradually maintaining the illusion. Eleanor remained ostensibly to speak with the pastor, in reality to meet with Ruby and Clara. The strangers followed Elizabeth to the north pasture yesterday, Clara reported once they were alone. She led them on a wild chase, made them think she was meeting someone. Good, Eleanor nodded. Keep them guessing, waste their time. Martha reports they've been drinking heavily at the saloon, boasting about a big score coming. One mentioned a woman who needs to learn respect. Eleanor's smile was thin. Let them think I'm afraid. It makes them careless. Ruby frowned. There's something else. Sheriff Reynolds received a telegram yesterday. Urgent. He wrote out immediately after reading it. To meet with Kane, Eleanor concluded. The pieces are moving faster than expected. Too fast, Clara asked. No, but we need to accelerate our own timeline. Eleanor turned to Ruby. The cavalry outpost at Fort Hanson. Is your contact still reliable? Captain Wilson, yes. He's sympathetic to our cause since Blackwater killed those settlers last spring. Good. Send word that we have intelligence on Blackwater movements. Hint at a possible attack on the fort itself. Nothing specific, but enough to raise alarm. You want military involvement? Clara asked, surprised. I want Kane to think I'm seeking it, Eleanor corrected. He has spies everywhere. Let them report that I'm reaching for help. And what will that accomplish? Ruby asked. It will force him to move before he's ready. Men like Kane cannot abide the thought of federal intervention. Their entire philosophy is built on the failure of central authority. Clara nodded slowly. You're provoking him. I'm controlling him, Eleanor clarified. Every move he makes in anger is a move I can predict. She glanced out the window again. The men were still watching. We should go, she said. Clara accompany me home looking appropriately concerned. Ruby wait 15 minutes, then leave separately. As they walked back through town, Eleanor maintained her posture of grief, shoulders slumped, gaze downcast. The perfect image of a woman drowning in sorrow. Inside, she was counting steps, marking positions, calculating angles. The Blackwater men followed at a distance, making no effort to conceal themselves. A message, we see you, we're coming. Eleanor had a message of her own waiting. At her house, she thanked Clara sincerely for the other women's support, loud enough to be overheard. Once inside, she moved to her study, pulled the heavy curtains closed, and opened a hidden panel in the floor. From the compartment, she removed a wooden case. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a Remington model 1858 revolver, meticulously maintained. Thomas's service weapon. She checked the chambers, loaded them one by one. Next, she retrieved a leather-bound journal. 5 years of intelligence gathering. Names, locations, force strengths, everything she knew about Silas Kane and his operation. There was a soft scratch at the back door. 3 quick, 2 slow. The signal. Eleanor opened it to find Elizabeth dressed as a ranch hand hat pulled low. Report, Eleanor said, leading her to the kitchen. They took the bait, Elizabeth said, keeping her voice down. Followed me all the way to Willow Creek. I left the package where arranged. Eleanor nodded. The package. A waterproof satchel containing falsified military orders suggesting a major operation against Blackwater territories. More bait. Any signs they suspected? No. They're not subtle men. Elizabeth accepted the cup of coffee Eleanor offered. One kept his distance, watching through a spyglass. The others tried to flank me. Amateurs. Don't underestimate them, Eleanor warned. Kane may employ fools, but he isn't one. Kuni, what next? Now we wait. The information will reach Kane by morning. His response will tell us everything we need to know. Elizabeth hesitated. There's something else. I wasn't followed here, but there was a rider watching your house when I arrived. Not one of the men from earlier? Someone local. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Description. Couldn't see clearly. Average height, wore a duster, kept to the shadows. Our town spy, Eleanor murmured. Interesting. After Elizabeth left, Eleanor returned to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. The street appeared empty, but she knew better. They were out there watching, waiting. Her mind traveled back to another time, another war. Intelligence reports spread across a field desk. Thomas beside her, his face lined with fatigue as they planned the next operation. They had been a perfect team. Her mind is courage. Until Heron's Creek. The memories flooded back unbidden. Fire consuming the valley. Screams echoing through the trees. A tactical error that cost 300 lives. Not enemy combatants as intended, but a displaced regiment of their own men caught in the wrong place by bad intelligence. Her intelligence. The guilt had nearly destroyed her. Thomas had saved her, absorbed her pain, defended her actions to the command. And for his loyalty, he had been captured by Silas Kane, tortured, murdered. Or so she had believed for years. A movement across the street caught her eye. A shadow detaching from deeper shadows. The local spy growing careless. Or perhaps deliberately revealing themselves. A warning, a message. Eleanor stepped back from the window, mind racing. The players were assembling. The board was set. Tomorrow the game would truly begin. Dawn broke over Redemption Springs in shades of crimson and gold. Eleanor was already awake, had been for hours. Sleep was a luxury she rarely indulged anymore. She dressed methodically, not in widow's black today, but in a practical riding outfit, dark blue. The color of authority, of control. Her hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was pulled back severely. The Remington was secured in a custom holster beneath her jacket. A derringer tucked into her boot. A knife sheathed at the small of her back. Not out of paranoia, but certainty. Today, Kane would make his first move. A soft knock at the front door. Too early for casual visitors. Eleanor approached cautiously, checking the peephole Thomas had installed years ago. Sheriff Reynolds stood on her porch, looking uncomfortable. She opened the door just wide enough to address him. "Sheriff, it's barely 7. Mrs. Vance." He removed his hat. "May I come in official business?" Eleanor hesitated, then stepped back. "Briefly, I have matters to attend to." Reynolds entered, eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. "I understand you've been making inquiries about your brother's death. Wouldn't you, if it were your family?" "Ma'am, with respect, this is a delicate situation." He shifted his weight. "The men who killed Matthew, they're dangerous. More dangerous than you know. The Blackwater gang, yes, I'm aware of their reputation." Something flickered in Reynolds' eyes. Surprise, concern. "Then you understand why you need to let law enforcement handle this. Your activities are drawing attention." "What activities would those be, Sheriff?" "Meeting with women around town, sending messages to Fort Hanson." His voice hardened. "Stirring up trouble." Eleanor studied him. Not just a sympathizer then, actively working for Kane. "I'm a grieving sister seeking support from friends, Sheriff, and I have no idea what you mean about Fort Hanson." "Mrs. Vance." Reynolds leaned closer. "I know who you were during the war, what you did. That life is over. Don't bring that darkness here." A threat wrapped in concern. Classic intimidation. "Are you here officially, Sheriff? Am I under suspicion of some crime?" Reynolds straightened. "No, ma'am. Just a friendly warning. Redemption Springs is a peaceful town. We want to keep it that way." "As do I." Eleanor moved toward the door. "Now, if you'll excuse me." After Reynolds left, Eleanor watched through the window as he crossed to the telegraph office. Reporting to Kane, no doubt. She retrieved her satchel already packed and left through the back door. Ruby would be waiting at the stables. The morning air was crisp, tinged with wood smoke and pine. Eleanor moved carefully through back alleys, avoiding Main Street. She'd memorized every route through town, every escape path, every vantage point. Preparation was everything. Ruby stood by the stables holding the reins of 2 horses. Her expression was grim. "They've moved faster than we anticipated," she said without preamble. 3 more Blackwater men arrived before dawn. Martha's girl overheard them at the hotel. "They have orders to take you today." Eleanor took the reins of the chestnut mare. "Reynolds just paid me a visit, warning me off." "Then our plan is working. They're nervous." "Not nervous enough." Eleanor mounted smoothly. "Is everything in place at Copper Ridge?" Ruby nodded, climbing onto her own horse. Elizabeth and Sarah are already there. The supplies are hidden as you instructed. And the message to Fort Hanson, sent yesterday. Captain Wilson replied this morning. He's dispatching a patrol to investigate. Excellent. Eleanor turned her horse toward the eastern trail. Let's not keep our guests waiting. They rode in silence following the narrow path that wound through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. Copper Ridge lay 3 miles east of town, a former mining claim abandoned after the copper ran out. Now it served as the Widows Network's fallback position. Eleanor felt the familiar calm settle over her, the strategic clarity that had made her valuable during the war. Every contingency planned for, every variable accounted for. If Kane's men wanted her, they would find her, on her terms in her territory. The cabin came into view, a solidly built structure nestled against the ridge. No smoke from the chimney, no visible movement. Perfect. They've followed, Ruby said quietly. Eleanor nodded. She'd spotted the dust on the trail behind them 10 minutes ago. 2 riders, keeping their distance. Amateurs, Ruby muttered. Let's hope so. Eleanor dismounted, tethering her horse. You know what to do. Ruby hesitated. Eleanor, be careful. These men have nothing to lose. Neither do I. Eleanor squeezed her friend's arm. Go. I'll meet you at the secondary location by nightfall. As Ruby rode away, taking a different trail, Eleanor approached the cabin alone. She made a show of checking her surroundings, projecting the wariness of a woman who knew she was in danger, but not how close it was. Inside the cabin was sparse but well-equipped. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough wooden table stood in the center, maps spread across it. 2 bedrolls in the corner, supplies stacked neatly, and hidden throughout enough explosive charges to collapse the entire structure. Eleanor moved to the table, pretending to study the maps. Through the window, she tracked the approach of Kane's men. They had split up, attempting to flank the cabin. She allowed herself a small smile. So predictable. Reaching into her satchel, she removed a small metal device, a modified telegraph sender connected to hair-thin wires that ran throughout the cabin and surrounding area. Thomas's design improved upon during long sleepless nights. Now she waited, counting the seconds, tracking footsteps. The door burst open. 2 men entered, pistols drawn. Eleanor Vance. The taller one said, a Glasgow smile twisting his face. Silas Kane sends his regards. Does he? Eleanor remained calm, hands visible on the table. And what else does Mr. Kane send? An invitation, the second man said, younger with dead eyes. You're coming with us. Am I? Eleanor tilted her head. And if I decline, the scarred man chuckled. Ain't no declining, lady. Either you come peaceful or we drag what's left of you. Eleanor sighed as if disappointed. I served with men like you during the war, following orders without understanding them. Pawns who think they're knights. The younger man stepped forward, anger flashing. You don't know nothing about us. I know Silas Kane collects broken men, promises them a place in his new order, feeds them scraps of philosophy to make their violence feel righteous. She looked between them. Tell me, does he still quote Thoreau while ordering executions? The men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering. Enough talk, the scarred man growled. On your feet. Eleanor stood slowly. One question before we proceed. Did either of you participate in my brother's murder? A cruel smile spread across the younger man's face. Maybe. He squealed real pretty at the end. Something cold and terrible filled Eleanor's chest. Thank you for clarifying. Her hand moved to her jacket pocket. The men tensed, but she merely withdrew a small metal switch. What's that? The scarred man demanded. Insurance. Eleanor flipped the switch. Outside, an explosion rocked the hillside behind the cabin. Both men turned instinctively toward the sound. In that moment, Eleanor moved. The Remington appeared in her hand, firing twice in rapid succession. The younger man dropped a hole where his cruel smile had been. The scarred man managed one wild shot before a second bullet took him in the throat. Silence fell. Gun smoke hung in the air. Eleanor checked both men dispassionately, confirming they were dead. Then she activated the second switch. Small charges detonated throughout the cabin, igniting at strategic points. Not enough to destroy evidence, enough to create a convincing scene of chaos. She retrieved her satchel and exited, watching from a safe distance as flames engulfed the structure. The message would be clear to Kane: his men had failed. His quarry was more dangerous than anticipated. Eleanor mounted her horse and rode toward the secondary rendezvous, her mind already moving to the next phase. The true game was just beginning. Silas Kane stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the sunset paint the valley crimson. Below his camp, sprawled across the hidden plateau, 50 men, 24 horses, enough weapons to wage a small war. A force built over 5 years of meticulous planning. A kingdom in waiting. The messenger knelt behind him, head bowed. He had delivered the news without embellishment. 2 men dead, cabin destroyed, Eleanor Vance vanished. Kane didn't turn. Describe the scene again. The messenger swallowed. Ambush, sir. Professional work. Charges set in advance. Both Harlow and Reed shot clean head and throat. The cabin was burning when we arrived. And the woman's companion rode east toward the mountains. We tracked her to a creek, then lost the trail. Kane finally turned. His face remained impassive, but something burned in his eyes. She hasn't lost her touch. Sir, the Eleanor Vance I knew never killed without purpose. He looked back to the sunset. This wasn't just survival. It was a message. Foster approached, limping slightly from an old war wound. We could hit the town tonight. Flush her out. Kane shook his head. She's waiting for that. Every house rigged, every corner covered. Then what's our move? A cold smile touched Kane's lips. We show her what she's truly facing. Remind her what's at stake. He turned to the messenger. Tell Blackwood to prepare his men. 20 riders, full arsenal. Be ready at midnight. Foster frowned. The military patrol from Fort Hanson will arrive too late. Kane's voice was steel. Eleanor is playing a game with us, Daniel, trying to manipulate the board, but she's forgotten who taught her those moves in the first place. As darkness fell, Kane retreated to his tent. Inside, illuminated by a single lantern, maps covered a folding table. Territory marked controlled, conquered. 5 years of expansion. A vision taking physical form. From a locked chest, he removed a worn leather journal. Inside, yellowed pages contained battle plans, strategy notes, personal observations. Many in a woman's precise handwriting. Marginalia in his own hand danced alongside hers, a conversation spanning years of war. You always were my finest student, he murmured, tracing her notations, until you betrayed everything we built. Behind him, the tent flap opened. A hooded figure entered, face concealed. You're late, Kane said without looking up. The town is watching. Movement is difficult. The voice was soft, measured. And yet Eleanor Vance moves freely enough to kill 2 of my men. She's careful, prepared. The widow's network is more extensive than we realized. Kane finally turned. Tell me about this network. The figure stepped forward, pulling back the hood. Ruby Johnson's face emerged from the shadows, her expression unreadable. 6 women trained in combat and intelligence, all with personal grudges against men like you, all loyal to Eleanor. And yet here you are. Ruby's eyes hardened. You know why? Refresh my memory. Heron's Creek. Her voice caught slightly. My husband's regiment. 300 men burned alive because of Eleanor's intelligence error. The great military strategist too proud to verify her sources. Kane circled her slowly. And she never knew that you lost everything that day. Eleanor Vance sees what she expects to see. A devoted friend, a loyal supporter. Bitterness edged Ruby's words. She believes I lost my husband to raiders years after the war. A convenient story. And your true purpose in her network, to watch her suffer, to ensure she faces justice for what she did. Ruby straightened, but not at the cost of innocent lives. Your attack tonight is necessary. Kane cut her off. Fear is the only language some people understand, Eleanor included. There are women and children in that town. There were women and children at Heron's Creek too. Kane's voice was dangerously soft. Families who followed the regiment. Did Eleanor show them mercy? Ruby flinched. Your conscience is noted, Kane continued. But the attack proceeds. Your job is to ensure Eleanor Vance survives to witness it, nothing more. After Ruby left, Kane returned to the maps. His finger traced the route to redemption, springs calculating distances, timing contingencies. Let's see how you handle this move, Eleanor. he murmured to the empty tent. Eleanor crouched in the abandoned mine shaft, watching Ruby approach through a gap in the boarded entrance. The secondary rendezvous point had served its purpose, remote, defensible, forgotten by most townsfolk. "Clear?" she asked as Ruby slipped inside. Ruby nodded, removing her cloak. No one followed, but the town's crawling with Blackwater men, at least a dozen disguised as travelers. Reynolds. Meeting with them openly now. No pretense of neutrality. Eleanor lit a small lantern illuminating the rough-hewn chamber. Maps and documents were spread across a makeshift table. In the corner, supplies were stacked neatly, food, ammunition, medical equipment. "The others?" Eleanor asked. "Safe." Martha evacuated the West Side families to the old church cellar. Clara and Elizabeth are with them. Sarah is monitoring the hotel where most of Blackwater's men are staying. Eleanor nodded, satisfied. "In the military patrol?" "No sign yet." Ruby hesitated. "Eleanor, there's more. 2 riders returned from the cabin. They reported back to someone, not Reynolds. Someone staying at the boarding house." "Kane," Eleanor breathed. "He's already here." "You're certain?" "He wouldn't trust this to subordinates." "Not anymore." Eleanor turned to the maps. "This changes things, accelerates our timeline." Ruby watched her friend carefully. "You seem pleased." "Not pleased, prepared." Eleanor's finger traced lines across the town map. "Kane in Redemption Springs means he's committed significant resources. He's exposed. Or confident." Eleanor looked up sharply. "What did you see, Ruby?" A moment's hesitation. "Movement. In the East Hills. Could be nothing. Or reinforcements." Eleanor calculated quickly. "How many men can Kane field 30-40? From what we've gathered, closer to 50. Too many for a simple extraction." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "He's planning something bigger." She moved to another map, the regional territory. "The military patrol is the key. Kane knows they're coming. He needs to move before they arrive." "Which means tonight?" Ruby concluded. "Yes." Eleanor straightened. "We need to warn the town. Get everyone to safety. How Reynolds will block any official warning. Then we use the network." Eleanor grabbed her satchel. "The church bell. 3 long, 2 short, our emergency signal. Everyone to the mine tunnels." Ruby nodded, turning to leave, then paused. "Eleanor, what if this is what Kane wants to draw you out?" Something flashed in Eleanor's eyes, a cold, deadly certainty. "Then he'll get what he wants, and much more besides." After Ruby left, Eleanor removed a hidden panel in the mine wall, revealing a cache of weapons. Not just revolvers and rifles, but military-grade explosives, detonators, incendiaries. 5 years of careful acquisition and storage. She selected what she needed with practiced efficiency. The strategist was fully awakened, now calculating moves and countermoves. The grieving sister had vanished. Outside, twilight deepened into darkness. Eleanor moved through shadow, avoiding the main paths, making her way toward the church. From various points, she noted Blackwater men patrolling, more visible, now less concerned with concealment. Kane was growing confident. Good. The church loomed ahead, its white steeple stark against the night sky. Eleanor approached from the rear, slipping through the cemetery. At the back door, she paused, sensing movement inside. Drawing her revolver, she eased the door open, stepping into the darkness beyond. "You won't need that," a voice spoke from the shadows. Eleanor froze, weapon raised. "Show yourself." A match flared, illuminating the weathered face of Pastor Williams. The elderly man stood calmly, lighting a lantern. "I've been expecting someone," he said, his voice steady, "though I thought it might be Ruby." Eleanor lowered her weapon slightly. "Pastor, you should leave. The town isn't safe tonight." "I know." He set the lantern on a small table. "I've known for some time what's coming." Something in his tone made Eleanor tense again. "What do you mean, evil doesn't arrive unannounced, Mrs. Vance? It sends warnings, tests, defenses." His eyes, roomy with age, fixed on her with surprising sharpness. "Just as you've been doing these past years." Eleanor studied him carefully. "You know about the network. I know this town harbors many secrets, many wounds." He gestured to a pew. "Please, we don't have much time." Against her better judgment, Eleanor sat. The pastor remained standing, leaning on his cane. "Your husband, Thomas, he was a good man." Eleanor's grip tightened on her revolver. You knew him. Before the war, we corresponded occasionally after. The pastor's gaze turned distant. His last letter mentioned his concerns. About your work. About what it was doing to you. My husband died at Blackwater Hands. Eleanor said coldly. Whatever concerns he had died with him. Pastor Williams shook his head slowly. Is that what you believe? A chill ran through Eleanor. What are you saying? That death isn't always what it appears. That some men survive the unimaginable but return changed. Eleanor stood abruptly. If you know something about Thomas, speak plainly. The pastor sighed heavily. 3 years ago, a man came to me, broken in body and mind. He spoke of torture, of fire, of a woman he both loved and feared. He carried your husband's Bible, Mrs. Vance, with Thomas's name inscribed inside. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet. That's impossible. Thomas is dead. I received confirmation. From Silas Cain's men. Who told you exactly what Cain wanted you to believe? Eleanor staggered slightly, gripping the pew for support. Where is he now? Gone. After a few weeks of recovery, he left. Said he needed to find himself before he could face you again. The pastor's eyes softened with compassion. He was not the man you knew, Mrs. Vance. Cain's torture broke something essential in him. 1,000 questions flooded Eleanor's mind, but time was running out. She forced herself to focus on the immediate threat. Pastor, the town is in danger. Tonight, I need to ring the warning bell. He nodded gravely. I suspected as much when I saw the strangers arriving. What must I do? Get to safety, the mine tunnels beneath the North Ridge. Others will be gathering there. As Eleanor moved toward the bell tower, the pastor called after her, Mrs. Vance, whatever you're planning, remember that vengeance belongs to the Lord. Eleanor paused at the doorway. With respect, Pastor, the Lord has had his chance. Now it's my turn. The bell rope hung before her, ancient and worn. She took a breath, then pulled in the coded sequence, 3 long, 2 short. The sound shattered the night silence, rolling across the town, echoing from the hills beyond. A warning, a call to arms, a challenge. From her vantage point in the tower, Eleanor watched as lights appeared in windows. Movement in the streets below. The network responding, guiding townspeople towards safety. And from the east edge of town, riders approaching. Many riders' torches blazing. Cain had made his move. Silas Cain rode at the head of his column, 20 hardened fighters behind him. Torches illuminated their path, casting long shadows across the landscape. They made no attempt at stealth. Now, this was about power, about fear, about control. To his right, Foster surveyed the town through a spyglass. Movement near the church. The bell. She's warned them. Cain smiled coldly. Good. I want witnesses. Orders, sir. Cain raised his hand, bringing the column to a halt at the town's edge. Standard procedure. Secure the main street. Round up anyone resisting. Minimal casualties. For now. As his men spread through town, Cain remained on the ridge watching. Reynolds approached on horseback, his face tight with concern. This wasn't the plan, the sheriff hissed. You promised a clean extraction, 1 target, minimal disruption. Cain eyed him coolly. Plans change, Sheriff. Eleanor Vance has escalated this conflict. We're responding appropriately. These are innocent people. No one is innocent. Cain cut him off. Every person in this town has benefited from your protection, my protection. They've made their choice by harboring a war criminal. Reynolds paled. War criminal? She's a widow, for God's sake. Is that what you believe? Cain laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Your ignorance doesn't absolve you, Reynolds. Eleanor Vance orchestrated military operations that killed hundreds. She experimented with psychological warfare that drove men to madness. A gunshot interrupted him, then another. From the town center, shouts echoed. Cain straightened in his saddle. It seems some of your townspeople are less cooperative than expected. This isn't what I agreed to, Reynolds said, his hand moving toward his pistol. Cain's gun appeared as if by magic, pressed against the sheriff's temple. Your agreement is no longer relevant, Sheriff. Your usefulness, however, remains to be determined. Reynolds froze. Now, Cain continued conversationally. You will ride down there and convince your people that cooperation is their only option, or I will burn this town to the ground, starting with the church." The sheriff swallowed hard, then nodded. Kane lowered his weapon, watching as Reynolds rode toward town, shoulders slumped in defeat. Foster returned, his expression troubled. "Resistance in the West Quarter. Organized. At least 6 shooters holding the crossing." "The Widows Network." Kane nodded. "Predictable. And Eleanor? No sign yet." "She'll be watching, calculating." Kane surveyed the town. "The church. That's her vantage point." He turned to Foster. "Take 5 men. Secure the church. If Eleanor Vance is there, I want her alive and unharmed. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." As Foster departed, Kane urged his horse forward, descending slowly toward Redemption Springs. Flames had erupted at the town's edge, a stable burning fiercely. Against the firelight, silhouettes moved, civilians fleeing, fighters advancing. Beautiful in its way. The birth of a new order, always painful. Kane reached the main street as Reynolds was addressing a gathered crowd, his voice strained with forced authority. "Temporary situation. Cooperate and no one will be harmed. Resist and—" The sheriff faltered as he saw Kane approaching. Kane smiled at the assembled townspeople, shopkeepers, farmers, laborers. Fear in their eyes, confusion, anger. Malleable emotions, useful for his purpose. "Citizens of Redemption Springs." He called out, his voice carrying effortlessly. "I apologize for this disruption. My name is Silas Kane." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I come seeking justice, not conquest. One of your residents has committed crimes that cannot go unpunished. Deliver Eleanor Vance to me, and this occupation ends immediately." Silence fell. Kane waited, watching faces, gauging reactions. Then from the back of the crowd, a woman's voice rang out. "And what crimes would those be, Mr. Kane?" The crowd parted. Eleanor Vance stood alone, unarmed, hands visible at her sides. Her posture was relaxed, confident. Only her eyes betrayed her, cold as winter steel. Kane felt an unexpected surge of admiration. "Mrs. Vance, a pleasure to finally meet you properly. I wish I could say the same." Her gaze swept across his men, the frightened townspeople, the burning buildings. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours." Kane dismounted, approaching slowly. "The architect of Heron's Creek, the ghost of the Peninsula Campaign, the woman who turned intelligence gathering into an art form." Eleanor remained impassive. "Ancient history, Mr. Kane. I'm a simple widow now. A widow who just killed 2 of my men." His smile never reached his eyes. "A widow with a network of trained operatives. A widow still playing at war." "You brought the war to my door." Eleanor's voice carried clearly to the crowd. "You murdered my brother." "A regrettable necessity. Matthew Vance was carrying military intelligence. He was carrying blank paper with a cipher header." Eleanor's expression hardened. "A test. To confirm what I already suspected, that Blackwater had infiltrated Redemption Springs." "Hunty." Kane's eyes narrowed fractionally. She had outmaneuvered him there, used her own brother as bait. Impressive and ruthless. "Your brother's death was merely the opening move, Eleanor. Surely you understand that." Kane gestured broadly. "This conflict was inevitable from the moment you arrived in Redemption Springs." "There is no conflict, Mr. Kane. Only a criminal gang terrorizing innocent communities." "Innocent?" Kane laughed. "Tell me how many of these good people welcomed you, knowing what you were? How many offered comfort when Thomas was taken, when he disappeared into Blackwater territory?" Eleanor's composure faltered for the first time. "You have no right to speak his name." "Don't I?" Kane stepped closer. "Thomas Vance, brilliant engineer, loyal husband, a man who followed you into darkness because he believed in your vision, a man who suffered for your sins. You murdered him." "Ah, did I?" Kane's voice softened dangerously. "Is that what you believe, Eleanor? That your husband is dead?" A terrible stillness came over Eleanor's face. "Pastor Williams told me. Thomas survived your torture." "Survived?" Kane smiled. "In a manner of speaking, the body lived. But the man—" He shook his head theatrically. "War changes us all, doesn't it? Breaks us, reshapes us. Where is he?" Eleanor's voice was barely controlled. Kane studied her, savoring the moment. Closer than you think. A commotion from the church direction interrupted them. Foster approached dragging a struggling figure. A man thin and wild-eyed, clothes ragged. Found him hiding in the bell tower, Foster reported, just as you expected. Kane gestured for Foster to bring the man forward. As he came into the torchlight, gasps rippled through the crowd. The man's face was a ruin of scars, one eye clouded white. But beneath the damaged features, once handsome, were still recognizable. Eleanor staggered back as if struck. Thomas! The man flinched at her voice, his good eye darting frantically. He muttered unintelligibly, shrinking from the light. What did you do to him? Eleanor whispered, horror etching her features. I enlightened him, Kane replied simply. Showed him the truth about the woman he married, the monsters she created, the innocents who burned at Heron's Creek because of her miscalculation. Eleanor moved toward Thomas, hand outstretched. Thomas, it's me. It's Eleanor. Thomas recoiled violently, a sound like a wounded animal tearing from his throat. Betrayer, firebringer, you killed them all. The words struck Eleanor like physical blows. She froze, hands still extended, as Thomas continued his broken litany of accusations. Kane watched with satisfaction. 5 years, Eleanor. 5 years of careful conditioning. Breaking down the old Thomas, building a new one. One who understands exactly what you are. Eleanor turned to Kane, something terrible transforming her face, a cold fury that transcended rage. You wanted a war, Silas, she said, her voice deadly quiet. Now you have one. A gunshot cracked from a nearby rooftop. One of Kane's men fell. Then another. Precise shots perfectly placed. The widow's network had moved into position. Chaos erupted. Townspeople scattered. Kane's men sought cover, returning fire blindly at the hidden shooters. Eleanor grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him away from Foster's momentary distraction. The scarred man fought briefly, then went limp, allowing himself to be led. Kane drew his pistol, taking careful aim at Eleanor's retreating form. So predictable, so emotional. A fatal weakness. Before he could fire, a bullet struck the ground at his feet. Then another closer. Warning shots. Another time, Eleanor, he called after her. This is just beginning. As Eleanor disappeared down an alley with Thomas, Kane signaled his men to fall back to defensive positions. The initial assault had achieved its purpose, revealing Thomas, destabilizing Eleanor, emotionally demonstrating Blackwater's reach and power. Now the real game could begin, a game he had prepared for over 5 years of exile and rebuilding. A game Eleanor Vance could not possibly win. Eleanor's safe house on the north edge of town was little more than a root cellar beneath an abandoned shack. But it was secure, stocked with supplies, and connected to the mine tunnels that honeycombed the ridge beyond. Thomas huddled in the corner, rocking slightly, muttering phrases that broke Eleanor's heart. She kept her distance, giving him space, watching for signs of recognition. Ruby arrived an hour later, slipping through the concealed entrance. Report, Eleanor said quietly, not taking her eyes off Thomas. 4 of Kane's men dead, 2 of the townspeople wounded, none killed. Kane has withdrawn to the East Ridge, but his forces remain around the town perimeter. And our people? Safe in the tunnels. Martha is coordinating supplies. Ruby's eyes moved to Thomas. Is it really him? Eleanor nodded, her throat tight. What's left of him? Ruby approached cautiously, crouching near Thomas, but not touching him. Thomas, do you remember me, Ruby Johnson? Thomas's head snapped up, his good eye focusing briefly. Ruby, Heron's Creek. You were there after. Ruby glanced at Eleanor, whose face had gone very still. Yes, Thomas, Ruby said gently. I was there after. The burning, the screaming. Thomas clutched his head. Eleanor's orders. Eleanor's mistake. Thomas, that's not... Eleanor began. Lies! Thomas shrieked, scrambling back against the wall. She knew, she always knew. Ruby rose slowly, moving to Eleanor. He's been conditioned, traumatized. Kane has poisoned his mind against you. With what? Eleanor whispered. What could possibly? Heron's Creek wasn't your fault, Ruby said firmly. Bad intelligence. A regiment in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thomas laughed, a broken sound. Tell her, Ruby. Tell her what you lost. Eleanor turned to her friend, confusion clouding her features. Ruby, something shifted in Ruby's expression, a hardening, a resolution. Not now. Thomas needs rest, and we need to plan our next move. Eleanor wanted to press further, but the tactical situation demanded priority. She nodded reluctantly. Kane revealed Thomas for a reason, she said, focusing on strategy. He's trying to destabilize me emotionally, break my concentration. Is it working? Ruby asked quietly. Eleanor's eyes flicked to Thomas, then back to her friend. He miscalculated. Seeing what he's done to Thomas doesn't weaken my resolve. It strengthens it. What's our move? Eleanor unrolled a map on the small table. Kane's exposed himself, committed significant forces to this confrontation. We now know his strength, his position, his immediate objectives. And the military patrol should arrive by dawn based on standard cavalry movement rates. Eleanor traced routes on the map. Kane knows this. He'll plan to be gone before they arrive. Unless he's setting a trap for them too. Eleanor nodded grimly. A possibility we need to consider. For the next hour, they planned meticulously. The network's positions, evacuation routes, defensive fallbacks. All while Thomas muttered in his corner, occasional phrases cutting through Eleanor's concentration like knives. Your fault? All those men. You knew the risks. Finally, as midnight approached, Ruby prepared to leave to coordinate with the other women. Eleanor, she hesitated at the entrance. About what Thomas said. Later. Eleanor cut her off. After we've dealt with Kane. When Ruby had gone, Eleanor approached Thomas cautiously, keeping her movements slow, non-threatening. Thomas, she said softly, I know you're still in there, behind whatever Kane did to you. Thomas stared at the floor, rocking slightly. I never stopped looking for you, she continued. Never stopped believing I'd find you again. The fire, Thomas whispered. Always the fire. That wasn't me, Thomas. Heron's Creek was bad intelligence. A mistake. His head snapped up, eye blazing with sudden clarity. Not a mistake. A calculation. Acceptable losses, you called it. If there was even a chance of catching Kane's command? Eleanor froze. What? No, that's not what happened. I saw the orders, Eleanor. The original orders. With your notation. Thomas's voice steadied, becoming more lucid. Proceed even if confirmation of enemy forces is incomplete. Your signature. Your handwriting. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor. That's not possible. I would never. Kane showed me. The original document. Not a copy, not a forgery. Thomas's gaze bore into her. 300 men, 47 women and children who had followed the regiment, all burned alive because you couldn't wait for confirmation. Eleanor staggered back, gripping the table for support. No, that's not. I don't remember. You blocked it out, Thomas said, his voice suddenly gentle, almost like his old self. The guilt was too much. You constructed a new narrative, bad intelligence, a tragic mistake, not your responsibility. Thomas, please. Ruby's husband was with that regiment. Did you know that? Thomas continued inexorably. Lieutenant Michael Johnson. She identified his remains herself. Eleanor's legs gave way. She sank to the floor, mind reeling. Ruby never. She said her husband died after the war. Another lie. One you were happy to believe. Thomas's moment of clarity seemed to be fading, his eye growing distant again. So many lies, Eleanor. The ones Kane told me. The ones you told yourself. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her strategic mind desperately trying to process this new information. If Thomas was telling the truth, if Ruby's husband had died at Heron's Creek, then everything changed. Ruby wasn't just her friend and ally. She was a grieving widow with the perfect motive for revenge. The perfect spy for Silas Kane. I need to know the truth. Eleanor whispered more to herself than to Thomas. Her husband regarded her sadly, a brief moment of the man he once was shining through. The truth, Eleanor. The truth is that we're all monsters in wartime. Some of us just hide it better than others. As his lucidity faded, Thomas retreated back into broken muttering. Eleanor remained on the floor, mind racing through 5 years of friendship with Ruby, analyzing every conversation, every mission, every confidence shared. Had she been blind, so desperate for connection that she'd missed the enemy hiding in plain sight? Or was this another of Kane's manipulations, using Thomas as the perfect delivery system for a lie designed to shatter her network from within? Dawn was approaching. The military patrol would arrive soon. Kane would make his move before then. Eleanor rose, decision made. Truth or lie, she couldn't risk Ruby's potential betrayal. Not with everything at stake. The time for trust had ended. From now on, she would rely only on herself. And Thomas broke and damaged, but still her husband would be her secret weapon in the final confrontation to come. First light painted the eastern hills gold. Eleanor watched from the mineshaft entrance, counting the minutes until the military patrol would arrive. Her world had shattered during the night, but her mind remained coldly focused. Behind her, Thomas slept fitfully, his scarred face twitching with nightmares. 5 years of torture and manipulation had broken him, but glimpses of the man she loved still surfaced occasionally, moments of clarity like embers in dying ashes. Eleanor had made her decision. The final gambit was in motion. Footsteps approached from the tunnel. Eleanor drew her revolver, stepping into shadow. Clara emerged looking exhausted but alert. "Eleanor, Ruby sent me. The military patrol has been spotted approaching from the west." Eleanor lowered her weapon but remained wary. "How many?" 15 riders. Captain Wilson leading. And Kane's forces still surrounding the town. At least 30 men visible. Clara glanced behind Eleanor, gasping when she saw Thomas. "Is that—" "Yes." Eleanor cut her off. "Has Ruby shared this information with anyone else?" Clara frowned. "Just the network." "Why?" Eleanor made a swift calculation. If Ruby was truly Kane's spy, she would have already informed him about the patrol's approach. But Eleanor couldn't risk sharing her suspicions, not without proof. "Clara, I need you to deliver a message to Captain Wilson. Intercept him before he reaches town. Tell him Blackwater has set an ambush at the western approach." "Is that true?" "It's a precaution. Have him circle north approach through the mining district." Eleanor placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Tell no one else, not even Ruby. Can you do that?" Clara's expression shifted to concern. "Eleanor, what's happening? Trust me, Clara, please." After a moment's hesitation, Clara nodded. "I'll go now." When she had gone, Eleanor turned back to Thomas, who had awakened and was watching her with his good eye. "You suspect her," he said, his voice steadier than it had been yesterday. "Ruby." Eleanor knelt beside him. "What do you remember, Thomas, about Ruby? About Kane?" Thomas rubbed his temple, wincing. "Pieces, fragments. Kane showed me documents. Said Ruby had been working with him since before your arrival in Redemption Springs. To what end? Justice. Revenge." Thomas's eye focused on Eleanor with sudden clarity. "She blames you for everything. Her husband. The other losses at Heron's Creek. She wanted you to suffer as she had suffered." Eleanor absorbed this, each word confirming her worst fears. "And Kane? What does he want?" "You." Thomas reached out, touching her face with trembling fingers. "Your mind, your strategies. He believes with you at his side, his revolution could succeed." "Revolution?" Eleanor frowned. "Kane is a criminal, a bandit leader." Thomas laughed, a broken sound. "That's what he wants people to believe. Cover for his true purpose. Building an army. Former soldiers mostly. Men betrayed by the government they fought for. To what end? A new nation, carved from the territories, free from corruption and betrayal." Thomas's voice took on an odd cadence, as if reciting words he'd heard many times. "The old order must burn before the new can rise from its ashes." Eleanor recognized the words Kane's philosophy drummed into Thomas through years of torture and manipulation. "And Ruby helps him because she believes you deserve punishment. But also," Thomas faltered, confusion clouding his features. "Something else. Something about the church." "The church," Eleanor pressed. "The plan. Kane's final move." Thomas clutched his head. "Can't remember. He made me forget important things." Eleanor gently took his hands. "It's all right, Thomas. You've helped more than you know." She stood, decision made. If Ruby truly was Kane's agent, then the network was compromised. Every plan, every position, every fallback potentially exposed, which meant Eleanor needed a new plan. One that no one, not Ruby, not Kane, not even Thomas knew about. "Thomas, I need to go. You'll be safe here." She checked her weapons one last time. "I'll come back for you." Thomas caught her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Eleanor, the church. It's important." "Something about the church." "I'll remember," she promised. Outside, dawn had fully broken. In the distance, smoke rose from several points in Redemption Springs. Kane hadn't waited for the military patrol. The attack had already begun. Eleanor moved quickly along the ridge, keeping to cover. From this vantage point, she could see Kane's forces positioned around the town's perimeter. A standard encirclement, but with a notable gap to the north, a deliberate opening. An escape route meant to funnel fleeing townspeople into a predetermined killing zone, or a trap for the approaching military patrol. Eleanor circled wide, using game trails and dry creek beds for concealment. Her destination was clear: the old church standing on the edge of town. Something about the church was key to Kane's plan, and Ruby, her former friend now revealed as enemy, would be at the center of it all. As she neared the town, gunfire erupted sporadically. Shouts echoed through the streets. The scent of smoke grew stronger, acrid and threatening. Eleanor paused at the cemetery's edge, scanning the area. The church stood silent, its white steeple rising above the chaos below. No movement visible, no guards posted. Too easy. A trap, certainly. She circled the building, noting boarded windows, a reinforced back door. Signs of preparation. From her satchel, she removed a small mirror, using it to check the interior through a crack in the boards. Pews pushed against the walls. The floor cleared, and in the center, crates stacked methodically. Even from this limited view, Eleanor recognized military ordnance, enough explosives to destroy half the town. Thomas's broken words suddenly made sense. The church wasn't just a strategic position, it was Kane's scorched earth policy. If he couldn't have Redemption Springs, no one would. Eleanor retreated, mind racing. She needed to neutralize that threat before confronting Kane or Ruby. But first, she needed to warn the townspeople in the mine tunnels and redirect the military patrol. A movement caught her eye, a figure hurrying along the back of the buildings opposite the church. Ruby moving with purpose, a rifle slung across her back. Eleanor followed at a distance, staying hidden. Ruby approached a small storehouse, knocked in a pattern, then entered. A minute later, she emerged with another woman, Elizabeth Dawson, the network's best shot. They spoke briefly, Ruby gesturing toward the hillside where the military patrol would appear. Elizabeth nodded, then moved off in that direction, rifle at the ready. Eleanor's heart sank. Ruby was positioning the network members as unknowing parts of Kane's trap, using loyal women who believed they were defending their town to instead ensure its destruction. Time was running out. Eleanor needed to act now. Silas Kane watched the unfolding chaos from his position at the town's eastern edge. Buildings burned, people fled, his men advanced methodically. Not random violence, but controlled pressure, herding the townspeople toward predetermined points, creating the illusion of escape while tightening the noose. Ruby approached from behind, her face a mask of determination. The network is positioned as requested. They believe they're creating a defensive perimeter. Kane nodded approvingly. And the military patrol, spotted approaching from the west. Elizabeth is in position to signal their arrival. Excellent. Kane studied the town through his field glass. And Eleanor? Ruby hesitated. No confirmed sighting since last night. Thomas is missing as well. A flicker of annoyance crossed Kane's features. She's planning something. You were supposed to keep her contained, manageable. Eleanor Vance is never fully contained, Ruby said coldly. You know that better than anyone. Kane turned to face her fully. Having second thoughts, Mrs. Johnson, after 5 years of patient work? No, Eleanor must answer for what she did. But the townspeople will receive the same consideration she showed the families at Heron's Creek. Kane's voice hardened. You've played your part admirably, Ruby. Don't falter now. Ruby straightened. The charges are set. The church is prepared. And the detonator, here. Ruby patted her jacket pocket. As agreed. Kane smiled thinly. Then our business is nearly concluded. The final act awaits only its principal player. As if summoned by his words, a shot rang out from the church direction. Then another. His men returning fire at an unseen target. Kane's smile widened. It seems Eleanor has made her appearance. He gestured to his lieutenants. Proceed with the encirclement. Drive her toward the church. But remember, I want her alive. As his men moved out, Kane turned back to Ruby. It's time for you to take your position. In the church. When Eleanor arrives, you'll play your part one last time. Ruby nodded grimly. And then? And then justice will be served, Kane promised. For all of us. Eleanor moved through the burning town like a ghost, using smoke for cover, staying to shadows. She had triggered the shots near the church, deliberately drawing Kane's attention while she circled toward her true objective, the storehouse where Ruby had met Elizabeth. Inside, Eleanor found what she expected: maps of the town with defensive positions marked. The network's positions, all now serving Kane's purposes, and something else, a wooden case containing detonators. One missing, presumably the one Ruby carried for the church explosives. Eleanor had seen enough. Ruby's betrayal was absolute, the network compromised. The town itself was rigged as a killing field with the church as its deadly centerpiece. Her next move was clear: intercept the military patrol, warn them of the trap, then return to disarm the church explosives before Kane could trigger them. She slipped out the back, keeping low. The gunfire had intensified, concentrated now around the town center. Kane's men were executing a standard search pattern, working methodically through buildings, pushing toward the church. Eleanor skirted the engagement zone, heading west. The military patrol would be approaching through the mining district now, following her instructions to Clara. She could intercept them at the old processing plant. Halfway there, a bullet kicked up dirt at her feet. Eleanor dove for cover behind an abandoned wagon, drawing her revolver. "That was a warning shot," called a familiar voice. "The next one won't be." Elizabeth Dawson emerged from behind a water trough rifle aimed steadily at Eleanor's position. "Elizabeth," Eleanor called back. "Lower your weapon. We need to talk." "Ruby told me what you've done," Elizabeth replied, her voice hard. "Working with Kane, using us as cover while you negotiate your own safety." Eleanor's mind raced. Ruby had anticipated her discovery, prepared a counter-narrative. "Elizabeth, think. Who's been in this town longer? Me or Ruby?" "What does that matter? Ruby Johnson arrived 3 months before I did, established herself in the community, gained trust. Why? Because Kane sent her. To wait for me." Elizabeth's rifle didn't waver. "Ruby lost her husband to raiders. Everyone knows that." "She lost her husband at Heron's Creek," Eleanor corrected. "Lieutenant Michael Johnson. Killed in a military operation I authorized." Confusion flickered across Elizabeth's face. "That's not... Ruby would have told us." "Would she? If her plan was revenge all along?" Eleanor slowly raised her hands. "The church is rigged with explosives, Elizabeth. Ruby has the detonator. Kane plans to destroy the town and everyone in it. Why would Kane destroy his own men? Because this isn't about taking the town. It's about making a statement, proving that nowhere is safe, no one is beyond his reach." Eleanor met her eyes steadily. "And eliminating the one person who could prove a threat to his larger plans?" "Me." Elizabeth hesitated, rifle dipping slightly. "Think, Elizabeth, has Ruby been acting strangely, giving contradictory orders, separating network members when we should be consolidating?" The rifle lowered further. "The military patrol," Elizabeth said. "Ruby positioned me here to signal their approach. Said you wanted advance warning. To ambush them," Eleanor concluded, "or to ensure they arrive too late to stop what's happening." A long moment passed, Elizabeth weighing Eleanor's words against years of trust in Ruby. Finally, she lowered her rifle completely. "What do we do?" "First, we warn the patrol." Eleanor emerged from cover. "Then we stop Ruby before she can detonate those explosives." Ruby knelt in the church, making final adjustments to the charges. The work was precise, methodical skills learned during 5 long years of planning. 5 years of living a lie, of befriending the woman responsible for her husband's death, of smiling through rage, laughing through grief. Soon it would end. Eleanor would face justice. The woman who had ordered the attack at Heron's Creek, who had deemed Michael and 300 others acceptable losses in her pursuit of military glory. The wooden floor creaked behind her. "It's done," she said without turning. "Everything is in position just as you—" "Hello, Ruby." Ruby froze at the sound of Eleanor's voice. Slowly she rose and turned hand, moving to her pocket where the detonator lay. Eleanor stood in the doorway, revolver aimed steady. "Don't." Ruby's hand stilled. "How long have you known?" "Since last night. Thomas remembered enough to raise my suspicions." "Thomas?" Ruby smiled bitterly. "Kane's greatest success. Breaking Eleanor Vance's husband, turning him into a weapon against her." "Why Ruby?" Eleanor's voice remained steady, but pain flashed in her eyes. 5 years of friendship. Was it all a lie? Not all. Ruby's expression softened momentarily. There were times I almost forgave you. Almost believed your version of events that Heron's Creek was just bad intelligence, a tragic mistake. It was. No. Ruby's face hardened again. I saw the original orders, Eleanor, with your notation. Proceed even if confirmation of enemy forces is incomplete. 300 men burned alive because you couldn't wait for verification. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly. I don't remember writing that. Of course you don't. The great strategist unable to face her greatest failure. Ruby's voice dripped with contempt. Michael died screaming your name. Did you know that, cursing the woman who sent him into that trap? I'm sorry, Ruby. Eleanor's voice cracked. For Michael, for all of them. But this, she gestured at the explosives, this won't bring justice. Only more death, more innocent lives lost. Ruby laughed harshly. Spare me your morality? You weren't so concerned with innocent lives at Heron's Creek? That was war. This is war, Ruby countered. Kane's war against corruption, against a system that uses men like Michael, then discards them. Kane is using you, Ruby. Your grief, your rage. Once I'm dead and this town is destroyed, what then will Michael's memory be honored by more? Killing, more destruction? Something flickered in Ruby's eyes, doubt perhaps, or recognition of a deeper truth. It's too late, she whispered. Kane's men are surrounding the church. The charges are set. There's no stopping what's coming. There's always a choice, Eleanor said quietly. I learned that the hard way after Thomas disappeared, after I lost everything. You still have Thomas. Oh, a broken shell of Thomas, a man whose mind has been shattered by torture. Eleanor's eyes hardened. Kane did that. The man you've allied yourself with. Ruby's hand moved toward her pocket again. Kane did what was necessary, as I'm doing what's necessary. Ruby, please. The military patrol is minutes away. The townspeople are safe in the tunnels. This can end without more bloodshed. No. Ruby withdrew the detonator, a simple metal device with a single switch. It ends with justice. For Michael. For all of them. Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. She could shoot Ruby now, end the threat. But despite everything, some part of her still saw the friend, not the enemy. Eleanor! The shout came from behind her. Thomas staggered into view, his scarred face wild with urgency. Thomas! Eleanor's concentration broke for a crucial second. You should be... Kane, Thomas gasped. Coming dozens of men. And that moment of distraction, Ruby lunged forward, knocking Eleanor's gun aside. The two women crashed to the floor, struggling for control of both the revolver and the detonator. Thomas watched, frozen in indecision, his damaged mind unable to process the scene before him. Eleanor gained the upper hand, pinning Ruby beneath her. Drop the detonator. Never. Ruby's eyes burned with 5 years of accumulated hatred. This ends today. A slow handclap echoed through the church. Both women turned to see Silas Kane standing in the doorway, flanked by armed men. Thomas shrank back against the wall, whimpering. Ladies, Kane said pleasantly, I see you've started without me. Kane entered the church, slowly savoring the moment. Behind him, 6 men took position, weapons trained on Eleanor. A touching reunion, he observed. The strategist, the spy, and the broken husband. Almost poetic. Eleanor rose cautiously, pulling Ruby up with her, keeping the other woman as a shield between herself and Kane's men. It's over, Kane, she said evenly. The military patrol is minutes away. Your men are surrounded. Kane smiled. Always the strategist. Always calculating odds, positioning pieces. He circled them lazily. But you miscalculated this time, Eleanor. The patrol isn't coming to your rescue. What have you done? Nothing elaborate. Simply provided them with new orders, countermanded by an official source. Kane shrugged. Amazing what a military courier uniform and the right documentation can accomplish. Eleanor's mind raced. If the patrol had been diverted, her last hope for reinforcement was gone. The network was compromised, the townspeople hidden but vulnerable. What do you want, Kane? The same thing I've wanted for 5 years. Kane stopped directly before her. You. your mind, your strategic brilliance. The woman who orchestrated the most devastating intelligence operations of the war. To what end? A new beginning. Kane's eyes gleamed with fervor. The territories are ripe for revolution, Eleanor. The government corrupt and distracted. With your strategies and my forces, we could carve out a new nation, a place of true justice and order. Eleanor studied him, seeing not just megalomania, but genuine belief. Kane truly saw himself as a revolutionary, not a bandit, a visionary, not a killer, which made him infinitely more dangerous. And if I refuse, Kane gestured around the explosives-laden church, then Redemption Springs becomes a statement, a warning of what happens to those who defy the coming order. You'd kill your own men. Sacrifices are necessary in any revolution. Kane glanced at Ruby, still held in Eleanor's grip. Isn't that right, Mrs. Johnson? Ruby remained silent, the detonator clutched in her hand. You've served your purpose admirably, Ruby, Kane continued. Your hatred for Eleanor made you the perfect agent, but now I'm afraid your usefulness has ended. In one fluid motion, Kane drew his pistol and fired. Ruby jerked in Eleanor's arms, a red stain blossoming on her chest. Eleanor caught her as she collapsed, lowering her to the floor. Ruby's eyes were wide with shock, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Why? She whispered to Kane. Loose ends, Kane replied simply. You were becoming a liability. Too attached to this town, these people. Revolution requires purity of purpose. Eleanor pressed her hand against Ruby's wound, trying to stem the bleeding. Despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, she couldn't let her friend die this way. Ruby, stay with me, she urged. Ruby's eyes focused on Eleanor, clarity returning as life ebbed. The detonator, she whispered, pressing it into Eleanor's hand. Use it. Eleanor glanced down. The detonator wasn't armed, couldn't trigger the explosives. It was a fake, which meant the real charges, Ruby gasped. Under the floor, my design, not his. Understanding dawned. Ruby had played Kane as much as she'd played Eleanor, created her own plan within his. Kane stepped closer, unaware of their whispered exchange. Enough dramatics. Eleanor, you have a choice to make. Join me or die with this town. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. There's a third option. Abram, in one swift movement, she palmed Ruby's derringer from her belt, aimed and fired. Kane staggered back, clutching his shoulder, eyes wide with shock. Kill her, he roared. His men raised their weapons but hesitated. Thomas had emerged from the shadows, standing between them and Eleanor. No, he cried, voice stronger than it had been since his rescue. No more killing. In that moment of confusion, Eleanor acted. She yanked a hidden cord beneath the floorboard where Ruby had indicated. A mechanism clicked into place. Everyone out, she shouted. The whole church is rigged. Kane's men broke, fleeing through the doors. Thomas moved to Ruby's side, gathering her limp form in his arms. Go, Eleanor ordered him. Get her outside. I'll deal with Kane. Thomas hesitated, then nodded, lifting Ruby and carrying her toward the door. Only Kane remained, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. You're making a mistake, Eleanor, he hissed. Everything I've built is based on lies and murder, she finished for him. No different from the corruption you claim to fight. Eleanor backed toward the door, keeping her weapon trained on him. It's over, Kane. Your men are fleeing. The town stands. You've failed. Then kill me, he challenged. Finish what you started at Heron's Creek. Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. Justice demanded it. Revenge screamed for it. After all Kane had done to Thomas, to Ruby, to countless others, death would be merciful. No, she said finally. You don't die today. You live to stand trial for your crimes, to face the justice of the law you despise. Weak, Kane spat. Always your flaw. Not weakness, Eleanor corrected. Strength. The strength to break the cycle of violence, to choose a better path. She reached the doorway, glancing at the timer Ruby had set. 30 seconds remaining. The charges will collapse the church, Kane. Not level the town as you planned. Another failure for your revolution. Kane lunged suddenly, drawing a hidden knife. Eleanor fired reflexively, the bullet taking him in the leg. He fell, knife clattering away. Go, she said coldly. or die here, your choice. Eleanor turned and walked away, not looking back. Behind her, sounds of Cain dragging himself toward the door. She didn't care if he escaped the blast. His revolution was finished either way. Outside, Thomas waited with Ruby's still form. Around them, townspeople had emerged from hiding, watching in confusion as Blackwater men fled in all directions. In the distance, dust rose from the western road. The military patrol, perhaps not so diverted after all. Eleanor knelt beside Ruby, checking for signs of life. A faint pulse fluttered beneath her fingers. "She saved us," Thomas said quietly. "All of us." "Yes." Eleanor brushed hair from Ruby's pale face. Despite everything, in the end, she chose redemption. The church exploded behind them, collapsing inward rather than outward. Ruby's final act of protection for the town she'd come to love, despite her mission of revenge. As dust and debris rained down, Eleanor held Thomas's hand, watching as the military patrol appeared on the horizon. The immediate danger had passed. Cain's forces scattered his revolution, stillborn. But the greater challenges remained: a town to rebuild, wounds to heal, truths to face about the past. Heron's Creek, her own actions during the war, the paths that had led them all to this moment. Thomas squeezed her hand, his good eye finding hers. "What now?" Eleanor looked across the battered town at the people emerging from hiding at the ashes of the church, where she had finally confronted her past. "Now we begin again," she said softly. "Not forgetting, but moving forward. Together." Ruby stirred in Thomas's arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Eleanor." "I'm here." Eleanor took her hand. "Rest now. It's over." "Forgive me," Ruby whispered. Eleanor thought of Heron's Creek, of Michael Johnson, of all the pain that had led them here. "Yes," she said simply, "and perhaps someday you'll forgive me too." As the cavalry approached and townspeople gathered around them, Eleanor Vance stood in the ruins of her revenge. The taste of ashes filled her mouth, but beneath it something else, the faint, almost forgotten flavor of hope. Not redemption, perhaps. That would take more time, more healing, more truth. But a beginning, a chance. In a town aptly named Spring might come again at last. 3 months later, Eleanor stood in the cemetery, placing flowers on Matthew's grave. The town had rebuilt new buildings rising from charred ruins, wounds healing slowly but surely. Cain had survived the church collapse only to be captured by Captain Wilson's patrol. He now awaited trial in the territorial capital, his revolution broken, his followers scattered or imprisoned. The Widows' Network had disbanded, its purpose fulfilled. Some members had left Redemption Springs seeking new beginnings elsewhere. Others remained, helping to rebuild the community they had fought to protect. Ruby had survived her wounds, though recovery had been slow. The truth about Heron's Creek had emerged, not quite as Cain had portrayed it, not quite as Eleanor had remembered it. Like most wartime tragedies, responsibility was shared, failures compounded. She and Ruby spoke occasionally now, the conversation halting, painful, but necessary. Forgiveness remained a distant shore, but they had at least begun the journey toward it. Thomas's recovery proved more challenging. Some days lucidity returned and glimpses of the man he had been shown through. Other days darkness claimed him, memories of torture and conditioning overwhelming his fragile mind. But he was alive. They were alive. And in that simple fact lay a victory Cain could never understand or appreciate. "I thought I'd find you here," a voice spoke behind her. Eleanor turned to see Sheriff Reynolds, newly reinstated after a territorial investigation, cleared him of willing collaboration with Blackwater. Coerced, the court had ruled. A judgment Eleanor had neither supported nor contested. "Sheriff," she acknowledged with a nod, "got word from the Capitol." Reynolds removed his hat respectfully. "Cain's trial begins next month. They'll want your testimony." Eleanor nodded. "I'll be there." Reynolds hesitated, then added, "The judge mentioned extenuating circumstances for Ruby Johnson, given her actions at the end saving the town." "Good." Eleanor meant it. "She deserves that consideration. And will you stay in Redemption Springs?" Eleanor looked across the town, scars still visible, but healing, new growth emerging from ash. "For now," she said, "Thomas needs stability, and I have ghosts to make peace with." Reynolds nodded, understanding. "If you need anything." "Thank you." After he departed, Eleanor remained by her brother's grave, watching as the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of amber and gold. So much lost, so much gained. The bitter arithmetic of survival. From the church's ruins, a new building was rising, not a place of worship this time, but a town hall, a place for community, for governance, for moving forward. Eleanor touched the gravestone one last time, then turned toward home, where Thomas waited. Not the life she had planned, not the victory she had imagined for 5 years of exile and preparation, but perhaps something better, something real. Redemption, after all, was never meant to be easy. The end.